Is it fair to say that a HIPAA PHI compliance breach is potentially a practice-ending event?
It absolutely could be. If there's willful neglect, every one incident could be as much as $1.5, $1.6 million.
Today's guest is Jim Johnson, president of Live Compliance. This team helps healthcare organizations navigate HIPAA and regulatory compliance with tools that make the process efficient and accessible.
A lot of folks who might think, well, I'm just a small PT group. It doesn't matter, the rules still apply.
In today's world, all of our people are remote. So talk about the realities of a remote workforce, whether it's one person or all your people.
Let's say Bill is no longer part of your organization, but what's on his computer? Is that knowledge still in his version of whatever AI tool on his computer? And he's no longer with the company, but gosh, now he has protected health information on his machine. There's many incidents out there of you're the business owner, you're personally held.
How you help companies like us actually know that our workforce is being HIPAA compliant.
Absolutely. A lot to unpack there.
This is Bob Kowalick, and as you know, I'm a physical therapist, but also a business owner, former practice owner, and now in the business of helping practice owners basically be better revenue cycle management companies. And so, my physical therapist background, along with the fact that all healthcare providers out there are revenue cycle companies, unless they're 100% cash, and there's not many of those. So we just see lots of opportunities to improve revenue cycle. And so we're on today with Jim Johnson. He's the founder, CEO of two companies. One is called Live Compliance. The other is called the Paso Group. So we're going to touch on both of those things somewhat in the context of how Jim is doing some pretty interesting creative things to help healthcare providers and healthcare practices, basically in the area of technology risk reduction and HIPAA compliance. Just so that we kind of clarify right off the bat, this is not a podcast about coding per se and compliance related to coding and documentation, supportive coding and all that. That'll come in a different episode. This is compliance from the context of everyone uses computers, everyone uses the internet, everyone uses third-party applications, everyone uses, to some extent, third-party service providers. And in healthcare, risk is, there with respect to how these things are handled from the infrastructure, what's going on in the background. And so the goal of this podcast is to just help you just be aware of the realities of today's healthcare environment from a IT perspective, from a data protection perspective, from a HIPAA protection perspective, from an intellectual property protection perspective. And Jim's doing a lot of very interesting things with respect to all of those. And so we're just going to have a conversation about that. So Jim, feel free to introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
Well, thank you so much for having me as part of this. And yeah, like you so very well said about compliance, and no matter what size company you are, if you're a small physical therapy group or a large hospital network, the interesting thing is the rules are the same no matter what the size is. So a lot of folks who might think, well, I'm just a small PT group, it doesn't matter, the rules still apply. And with technology, especially now in 2025, who would have known how fast technology is changing and letting people do so many things, and there's so many options out there right now. And one of the things that is very important to know about that is the privacy and security, especially around state and federal regulations like HIPAA, all still apply.
Start with talking about, so when I first came to you, you did an assessment of our business and our HIPAA risk from a technology perspective. And talk a little bit about how you evaluate that, and what are some of the things that practice owners need to know about where technology-based risks really come from?
Yeah. So coming straight from the Office for Civil Rights years and years ago now, hasn't changed. As you work with any type of protected health information, and even in many cases, personally identifiable information, you are responsible for knowing where that data is and who has access to it.
Let's make sure everybody's really clear on what protected health information actually is.
Okay, so protected health information is any two or more identifiers, three really identifiers that could point to a person. So you could take, for example, somebody's first and last name. You could have a picture of that person. You could even have their email address or their physical address. And that's enough to identify a person. You could also even take where you're talking about medical information, protected health information could be account numbers, could be diagnosis, and combine that with anything like a zip code and a name. And now you have protected health information, and you're responsible for that information downstream. So if you're a physical therapist office and you have an outside IT company who's helping you, they have access into your system. You're giving them access to that protected health information, but you're still responsible for ensuring that they are protecting it, just as the information that's been given to you has been assumed that you're protecting it.
Yeah, so the typical relationship is, right, the provider or the practice side is what's called the covered entity, right, in a business, BAA, right, business shit agreement. And everyone should have a BAA in place with anyone else that does things for them that
Yeah.
could in any way access PHI, correct?
Yeah, access, transmit, and it doesn't necessarily, when you use the word access, so you could have an IT company, just as an example, an IT company that manages workstations, and they say, "Well, we don't have access to your protected health information," because they don't log into like an EMR or PM system. And that's not the case. They have access to the technology that holds that. So, um, the data at rest, the data in transmit. It's very important to understand your perception of the word access might not be right. So it's very important that you understand what is considered accessing or transmitting protected health information. And you're right. A physical therapist would be a covered entity. The In this example, IT company would be the business associate. And the business associate agreement that you mentioned is this contract that says this entity that you're giving access to this information, they have these protections in place. They will do this. They will follow these rules. They will notify us if they have a breach. So it's a contract. It's not just this standard thing that you have somebody sign. And we see that a lot, and that causes a lot of problems because the language in that really outlines what everybody is supposed to be doing.
Yeah, so while we're on the context of HIPAA compliance and PHI protection, that kind of stuff, what are the consequences of a HIPAA breach?
Oh, the consequences could be enormous, because now every one improper disclosure, every one account, every one record,
Every
every
instance of
every incident,
Right.
every one has to be reported to the Office for Civil Rights by the covered entity. It used to be 500 or more. Now it's every one. So, there's and every one that's reported gets looked into.
If you're found to have done something improper or didn't have good protections in place, you were somehow negligent, right, in the protection of PHI, what could that look like in terms of penalties or what does the government agency do to you if
Yeah.
you end up on the wrong side of that decision?
Yeah. So, depending, There's really 4 different levels when you're audited. Even I didn't know is $1,000 fine. If there is willful neglect, every one incident could be as much as 1.5, $1.6 million.
Or like if one patient visit information gets leaked, you could be on the hook for
Yeah.
$1 million or more. Seriously, that it's that kind of risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it really doesn't matter the size. So, to say, well, I'll just shut my doors. It doesn't matter. There's many incidents out there of people who get personally, you're the business owner, you're personally held.
Is it fair to say that a HIPAA PHI compliance breach is potentially a practice ending event?
It absolutely could be. The monetary part that you're pointing out, that's certainly obvious. The other part of it too is the reputational damage. And with most every incident that I've seen, not only is there that monetary fine, but of course that reputational damage, with improperly sharing somebody's information. But then you're also audited every 90 days for 2 years to make sure you do actually mitigate and implement the corrective action plans that you didn't have in place. And what's really, that's the scary part of all of this, and really pushes people to go, oh my gosh, I got to put something in place. And the good news is, though, it is achievable. It is doable. There are reasonable steps that could be taken. There are things that, even if you don't understand all these regulations and all this technology and stuff, it really is a doable thing to protect
So
this information.
we're not attorneys, right? We're not giving legal advice here, but there are legalities, there are contracts, there are BAA agreements, there are things these things should be properly drafted
Yeah.
in a way that protects the covered entity
Yeah.
from things that the business associate ultimately has to control, right? And so a properly drafted BAA is super important. I know that the BAA that we use with our clients is something that you basically made sure our language was up to date, that the current references to things, you essentially, blessed that agreement as properly covering us as a covered entity. So, that is one of the things that practices need to have in place in order to be, it's one of many things that are essential to having, in the context of risk, right?
The point of this awesome thing that you're doing with your podcast and stuff is to bring value to the folks who participate in this. So, just to give some value to people who are like, where would you even start with something like this? Because a lot of folks we hear very often, they say, well, we use Microsoft 365 and they're HIPAA compliant. I use this EMR and it's HIPAA compliant. I use Google and I put my stuff in Google Drive and it's HIPAA compliant. So we're HIPAA compliant. The biggest takeaway there is that's great. You're supposed to do those things and they're HIPAA compliant, but you have to be also HIPAA compliant, right? It's down the chain. So to say, as an example, we use Google and it's HIPAA compliant. And yes, you store protected health information in Google Drive, and it, yes, is protected, meeting the security requirements. But what you do with that data, that's up to you. So if you put a whole bunch of protected health information in your Google Drive and then you improperly share it, or you send it to the wrong person, or you share a link that makes that information accessible to people who shouldn't have it, Google Drive still is HIPAA compliant, but you've done something with it that now puts you in a bad spot. So all of that to say, again, the Office for Civil Rights points this out so many times. Your workforce is your first line of defense. So like you said, you get attorneys, you have all of this policies and procedures perfect. You're doing it, but your workforce can not be trained, not understand the information that they're dealing with and share it improperly, and now you have a problem.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that you do for us is um, we kind of quiz our workforce, right?
Yeah.
You test our people. They have to pass a HIPAA compliance um, test of sorts before they start working for us. You you retest them over time. You send them emails trying to get them to click on something they shouldn't click on, which
Yeah.
shows that they don't really, their actions are not perfectly aligned with protections. And so, it's important that businesses have these kinds of things in place to not just assume that because I have policies and systems and procedures or whatever, that risks are not happening, right? You have to know, and ignorance is not bliss, right? Just saying I just didn't know is not a defense. And so talk a little bit about that, about how you help companies like us actually know that our workforce is being HIPAA compliant.
So, a few things like you pointed out, of course, training and testing. And it's important to know also with that, that just taking general, what is HIPAA stand for, and what is PHI and what is EPHI, those are all great educational points to know. Again, your workforce has to know your policies and procedures, know your environment, know how you're using, accessing, transmitting protected health information, and make sure that you as a company are taking all reasonable steps to educate them on ensuring you're safeguarding that information. So, what you were pointing to was the way we have worked with your team and ongoing. It's not a once every so often exercise, once every couple years type thing. As things change, to make sure they're educated on what they should be doing, what they shouldn't do, and then test them on it. Even things like what we've recently been doing over the past, gosh, couple years with RCS and sending out phishing campaigns, and ensuring that folks aren't clicking on the wrong things, and not really from the perspective of coming down on folks and pointing out what they've done, terrible, but to educate them and say, hey, here's what we want you to look for next time. This is something that you shouldn't do, and here's why. Because again, your workforce is your first line of defense. So if we can empower them to understand how to do their jobs without putting patient information at risk, that's going to just help you as a company, and it's going to help you serve PT practices and ensure that them as the covered entities can have a high level of trust in what you do for them. It does go back to reputation.
So, in today's world, and I'm a perfect example, all of our people are remote, right?
Yeah.
They don't sit in an office where they log into their machine at the office, right? In our world, when I'm sorry, when COVID happened, right, in 2020, our office was based in Southeast Michigan. Michigan's governor she just put out executive orders and shut the state down.
Mhm.
You could be arrested for trying to get to work, right?
Yeah.
Literally. And so, we were forced to go remote. That restriction stayed for, I think, in Michigan about 6 months. So, we were out of business if we didn't um, come up with a way to have a remote workforce. We were 100% forced, to do that. And so, even in clinics today where, patients are coming to a location, obviously, I mean, there is telehealth and there is remote therapeutic monitoring and other things that you're doing with your patient at home, um, which is let's maybe think about, is there any risk specific to those kinds of things? But beyond that, having anybody who is accessing your EMR, your billing platform, your clearinghouse, your payer portals, through a remote work environment. So talk about things like whose machine are they on? Is this a company machine or a personal machine? If you're in Google Drive, is it my drive or a company drive? Even in the case where, my son's a physical therapist, has a small practice, 3 physical therapists, and they've just had a situation where their normal front desk person who normally sat in the office and was always there 8 hours a day is now moving out of state. And the replacing that expertise and knowledge around the insurance side of interacting with patients on patient registration, on cost shares, knowing what the patient owes, patient statements, all those kinds of things, right? They're going to allow her to do the insurance piece essentially remotely and have somebody who's physically at the front desk checking patients and doing scheduling and those kinds of things. So they're kind of dividing that position now into things that could happen remotely. So talk about that, the realities of a remote workforce, whether it's one person or all your people, and how that is something that needs to be. What kinds of things do you really need to know about and control and consider in a remote workforce environment?
Yeah.
And let me just one more thing on that. You may be 100% in your clinic all the time treating your patients, but are you doing notes from home on your laptop, right? So think, remote means any kind of out of the office access to your data information systems, stuff where PHI lives, right? So talk about that.
Yeah. So remote is really anything outside of the trusted network, the traditional office environment where you could be behind one firewall and really gatekeep the activity within it. And that's just not a reality in today's world. Everybody does things remote, from everything on your iPhone to iPads. And most people in this space have folks that are even overseas that are accessing things within your protected health information. And some real world things to put your eyes on. And of course, you've addressed these way back as soon as you went to remote. And that goes back to the training that we were talking about and the education. It's not just generic HIPAA training that everyone just has to click through. It's actually very specific. And some of those things that your viewers can get some value right away from are, okay, you have people who are, let's just pick on working from home. You ensure that everybody has a company issued computer, so you can control what that machine does. It especially introduces issues where somebody might be working from home from a family computer. Who knows what kind of things kids or other family members might have clicked on that may have introduced malware or something on that machine that they don't even know about, that is now able to access that protected health information. Sharing devices, which probably are like the home version of Windows, which don't offer the protections of the encryption, and ensuring that that machine has those security functionalities built in. And and those are some of the simple examples that are technology. But protecting health information isn't just an exercise in IT stuff. When you have people working from home, did somebody print something out and, oh, that wasn't the right record I needed to print out, so they just throw it away. And now you actually just threw away protected health information in a normal, kitchen garbage pail, and it wasn't properly shredded and de-identified to where somebody else couldn't just see that patient's information, which would be considered an improper disclosure of PHI. So working from home really introduces a lot of vulnerabilities, not just from home, remotely, a lot of vulnerabilities on how to dispose of physical protected health information. Um, being on the phone. It's not just an exercise in technology. It's also the physical stuff, but then also verbal stuff. So are you working from home and you have your windows open and you're talking about patient stuff, and the neighbor outside could now hear this medical information, because even verbal is considered protected health information if you're talking about that type of stuff. So being outside of a traditional corporate office definitely introduces some safeguards that you really need to be mindful of.
It just brings up a thought. So there is an optimal home office environment that, from a not just a concentration, focus perspective, but from an
Right.
actual compliance perspective is important. Like you said, windows open or shut, and who can see your screen when they're walking by your door. Do you even have a
Right.
camera? Are you sitting out in the kitchen, right? Um, those kinds of things, and screen protectors, or is there a resource for what's the optimal home office environment from a HIPAA protection perspective? And I want to throw out another point here that maybe you could speak to when you answer that question is, chat GPT.
Yeah.
Okay. It's what I see happening all the time is ask chat GPT for, like, hey, what's the ideal HIPAA compliant home office environment? And it's going to give you an answer, whether it's right or wrong. It will tell you, right? Or go to chat GPT and say, what's the best business associate agreement I should have with my business associates as a covered entity. And it will give you a legal document. So talk about how people are going out there into the wild west of AI and large language models and ChatGPT to get answers for things, and what kind of advice would you give for or against that type of thing in the context of compliance risk?
So a few things. One is, the asking about the perfect home environment and where's some resources and stuff like that. And it really just points to what most everyone in this space would say they heard of, and that's called a risk assessment. And everything compliance related really springboards off of a risk assessment. And when we're talking about, paperwork or windows open or people could hear or see or all of these different things, those really go to like the physical safeguards, policies, procedures, those type of things. Those are more the administrative safeguards. And then when you're talking about screen protectors and encryption and stuff, those go to your security safeguards. So it's really, really important as things change to ensure that a risk assessment isn't a once every year, 2-year thing. It's when you have a significant change in personnel, significant change in environment, like when you went from a traditional office to working from home. If you have a significant change in technology, that's when a risk assessment will help point you to where those vulnerabilities.
What is in a good risk assessment, and how can people get that? In healthcare, front office turnover, big thing nowadays. It's
Yeah.
hard to keep consistent people in almost any kind of role. There's, staffing. One of the, I think, cultural changes that COVID drove was, even more frequent employment change than what was already, there. Back in, the good old days, people had a job for life, and I think pre-COVID the average now was 10 or 12 different employers in a lifetime. I'm not sure what the data is now, but it's even higher. So in the context of change, it could just be that kind of change, right? It's not necessarily disruptive, like our entire workforce had to go from in office to remote, but change someone at your front desk, or
And all of that really does tie into your second question about, ChatGPT, all of these different AI tools that are available. Now that AI is allowing people to develop apps and things really quickly. and make them look extremely professional, where before you could really tell what was involved in an app just by the way it looked, and now that's really hard to see. So super simple, goes back to what we were just talking about how Google Drive, for example, if you have the right plan, is HIPAA compliant, but what you do with it is essentially on you. So much like all of these AI tools, they may do amazing things. They may allow you to, quickly get information on something. But if you upload somebody's patient information to some AI thing and ask it a question, who has that PHI now that shouldn't have had it? That some employee just uploaded something to some AI model, and now your company is at risk because where did that go?
So talk about what should be involved in a good risk assessment. And then I want to move on to something that you just mentioned, where the kind of in the AI space, how you protect data, your knowledge base,
Yeah.
intellectual property. The beginning of the AI thing with ChatGPT, you basically anything you put in it was available to anybody, right? And now that's changing somewhat to where you can create almost your own universe of knowledge that your AI is confined to, so that it's not putting information at risk or bringing in maybe outside stuff that could actually alter the outcomes of what AI decides in a way that's actually not favorable for what you're trying to do. So
Yeah.
talk about all those kinds of things that
Yeah.
in today's world and getting more and more prevalent and as by the day almost.
No, it truly is by the day, and a lot to unpack there. But let's say you do even have an AI tool. You have the business version of ChatGPT. Well, what you also want to make sure of is when it comes to doing a risk assessment, you would also want to make sure that you'll notice, and you could all go check this in your settings, that there is memory within it, that it will try to remember of what you've asked it, what you've shared with it, so it continues to give you better and better examples. Now, going back to what you were saying about folks working remotely and stuff like that and high turnover, let's say Bill is no longer part of your organization, but what's on his computer? Is that knowledge still in his, version of whatever AI tool on his computer? And he's no longer with the company, but gosh, now he has protected health information on his machine. Did somebody see something on LinkedIn or something of a new AI tool, and gosh, they want to try it. So they try it, and it says that it's private and it says that it's secure. Oh, okay. That's just reading some words. Anyone could type stuff on a web page and say that it is. And that's really where a risk assessment done correctly will evaluate those risks and mitigate any of those vulnerabilities with sharing that information. Because again, go back to the fines, go back to the reputational damage. What's super easy to wrap your head around when we're talking about protected health information, because you might have people who are like, "Oh, I don't care. Somebody knows I went to an urgent care because I had a cold. Who cares?" Okay, that's an easy case. But protected health information isn't like losing your credit card. Like you lose your credit card, you call the bank, they stop the thing, they give you a new one, and you're good to go. But when your medical information gets out there, you can't unring that bell. So protecting health information that patients entrust and share with an organization, and then that organization uses companies to help support them, and they have access to that information. It creates this chain of where your information is, and it's just very, very important because it's almost impossible to unring that bell when somebody's medical information, insurance information, financial information all gets out there. And who knows where it is? I mean, there are some cases where stuff has made it on Facebook. You can't really get that stuff off. So it's a huge impact, and really the answer just goes back to ensuring that you know where the protected health information that you're entrusted to have, where it is, who has access to it.
So if we could summarize kind of the takeaways here of what are the basic, let's say top 5 things everyone needs to make sure that they have in the healthcare business,
Yeah.
that they have in order. For me, we have, and I'm not saying this is the definitive list, but I can tell you that, um, we have your service in place. You are constantly checking our compliance. You're evaluating our people's knowledge with HIPAA and PHI protections. You test them. You try to get them to, you try to trip them up by sending them phishing emails and things like that. We own every machine that our workforce uses
Yeah.
the course of doing their job. We don't want personal laptops, personal, computers connecting to our HIPAA world, right?
Yeah.
Um, we do screen people when we hire about what the home work environment is. Do you have an office? Can you shut a door? Those kinds of things. And so there's are there other things that you think are just
Mm.
absolutely fundamental must-haves to
Oh, yeah.
be compliant from a security risk technology perspective?
Absolutely. And we've talked about really the very basics, other things that live compliance does and does for you. And whether you use live compliance or not, you should have on your radar is excluded parties verifications, making sure monthly that against the federal and if there is a state excluded parties list, that your workforce and vendors are compared against that list to make sure that you're not sharing information with people and organizations who have been explicitly excluded from having access to that information, typically called like OIG excluded parties.
And
Uh,
could you set your systems up to prevent accessing those things?
to prevent accessing those things. Well, these are excluded parties lists, so there's a federal database of folks who may have been involved in something that they are no longer allowed to access certain information, and you as a company need to check monthly to make sure your folks aren't on that list. And that's a tricky thing because folks have maiden names, folks are if they get married, folks separate and their name changes, so having a very intuitive system that can keep up with that monthly can be an arduous process. And just a little pointer to live compliance, we do that every month and pull up and see if we could find any potential matches and then bring that to the attention. When you're talking about technology and ongoing compliance, we monitor all of your devices for any vulnerabilities that may come up and categorize it based on the EPSS, National Institute of Standards and Technology's rating. So if there are vulnerabilities that are a 0 to 3 day vulnerability, it gets fixed immediately.
Sorry to interrupt. What
Yeah.
advice would you have for somebody that kind of thinks like this? Well, I know I'm not an expert in this certain subject matter, but you know, I'm not a big company. Nobody's going to really come after me. I'm a big believer in you control and own your core competencies that you really know, as well as, if not better than anyone else. And outside of that, you bring in people who are really that for that other subject matter area, right? That you need in today's world the best systems and controls essentially in every different element of your business. And if you don't have that yourself or internal to your business, have that capability, that experience, that knowledge, hire somebody that does.
Yeah, totally. And the perception of, gosh, I'm just a small company. No one's gonna. How am I gonna be expected to do these kind of things? Again, it's doable. It's not It's not as expensive as you would think. I mean, that's the business that you're in. If you're in healthcare, of dealing with protected health information. And again, it goes to reputation because those those protections nowadays are very much assumed by patients. When you go to a doctor, you're assuming you're signing all these HIPAA forms, right? So it's not like a lot of these organizations don't know about HIPAA. It just seems, in some cases, to your point, that it seems like it's not doable. And using a platform, using something like live compliance that takes all of these things and puts it in one central place and helps point you to what needs to be done, and having experts that can help hold your hand no matter what comes up. It's very, very important because that's your business. If you had a fine, if you were audited, you would have to do this anyway.
I have revenue cycle solutions that does the medical billing revenue cycle management process for practices. I also have Ascend Solutions. We've developed our own proprietary data platform that converts biller experience into data so that we can understand complexity drivers and time demand drivers and all those things that go on that are getting more and more complicated in
Yeah.
healthcare. There's a term of administrative burden, whatever you want to call it, but it's getting more and more. What I tell practice owners who do their own billing in-house, and that's great. My experience is you're either wired to want to have someone do it for you or you're going to do it for yourself. And it's hard to jump tracks on that. You're pretty much committed to one belief system that I just want to control these things and have it in-house. Some are the exact opposite. I would never consider employing people that do billing because I don't know anything about it, and I don't want to be in charge of it, right? And so what I tell practice owners that do billing in-house is you're a billing company. You just have one client. And so in that context, right, if you don't have someone like Live Compliance helping you assess risk, control risk, understand risk, mitigate risk, right? All these things, then you're a compliance company too, with one customer. So, I do think it's, generally my philosophy, right, is to control what you know best,
Yeah.
use others that know better to help you control the things that you might not do such a great job at doing. And in your experience working with healthcare practices across the country, um, how do you see risk change based on the do-it-yourself in-house models versus the hire a company that's exclusively devoted to that core competency?
It's just night and day. It really is. What we've talked about together here today so far has been really slighted on the security side of, um, the medical environment and HIPAA. And one of the other sides when it comes to the covered entities is the privacy. And that's a whole nother thing. There are so many state requirements, the Cures Act, being able to make your notes available in a timely manner in the format that the patient requests it, privacy around minors and what information can be shared, how information can be shared, and with who it could be shared. To take this on because you're a practice manager and you've just done it for 27 years, that's taken on a lot because being a practice manager in and of itself is quite a job, but to say that you also keep up with all the regulations and all of that is just it's just a lot. We've seen a lot of folks who realize quickly, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. And unfortunately, many of them find out when a patient complains and then they're audited. And it's like, well, shucks. so so you're right. They are also acting as a compliance consultant to their own practice, and you probably wouldn't hire that person to do that if you looked at it from outside. especially with the privacy and security and all that's changing, especially in 2025.
So awareness is the first step to commitment,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of people are just not aware, not only the risk, but also the options, right? The things that are available. So, hopefully we're helping provide a little bit more awareness through, to anyone listening to this. Um, Switching tracks just for the last few minutes here, and we're involved in this ourselves. Almost everyone today, whether you're looking for things that you do for yourself inside of your practice or using third parties that you're contracting with, almost everyone is experimenting with and implementing AI solutions to many things that have always been human performed tasks, right?
Yeah.
So this is the way of the world. AI is here. It's not going away. It is, I think every healthcare business, every revenue cycle management company out there, needs a strategy for what and how AI is utilized and integrated within their business. You know, there are many options, many things. There's entire new companies out there that have taken, one specific process and now converted it into AI. I talked with a company just 2 days ago that has automated the accounts receivable statusing process by phone. That's all they do.
Mhm.
I um, I'm aware of other companies that have automated the insurance eligibility process, checking verification of benefits. We're looking at many different applications for where we're starting with is understanding better the results humans are getting from doing the things that they do, quality control, data quality, looking at the how you support the effectiveness and the efficiency of a human doing, right, a task versus replacing them entirely. Talk about, because your company Passel Group is starting to help companies with strategic integrations for automations, picking specific things that and so talk about how a practice owner in today's healthcare environment with the trend and the realities of artificial intelligence, and that's a kind of a misnomer almost in a term in itself, right? But large language models versus machine learning versus what's really AI, and where does somebody start if they haven't already started diving into this? How does a practice owner start to think about what might be, appropriate for them in terms of integrations with AI within their practice? Your EMR companies are doing it.
Mhm.
Billing software companies are doing it. You talk to a robot when you call your health insurance, right? And so, yeah, just, it's here to stay. And I believe that every healthcare practice and practice owner needs to have a strategic plan for automation.
Absolutely. And there's huge value in what this technology can do. That's obvious. Even the simplest examples, you can find huge value in it. And it is teleradiology, radiology, physical therapy. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that it can bring benefits. And some of the vendors that you were talking about that are creating automations or applications to help with making things more efficient and more automated. I think the one biggest takeaway that I would point to is ensure that you do have a business associate agreement in place with these vendors. Ensure that you understand where that data is going, where it is. if you have the right to have all of your data removed, if you asked, all of these um, tools are doing something with your data. And if you get somebody's protected health information, which is really only 3 identifiers, you're responsible for it. So ensuring those things and practices who say, well, I have cyber liability insurance, I have med mal and stuff like that. Well, go check your application. You're checking the boxes saying that you are doing these things. So don't have your claim denied because they say you said you did all these things and they find out you uploaded stuff to some platform and didn't do these, because that's a quick way to get your claim denied. Um, when you're talking about, what the Passel group is focused on is helping um, support and develop, if necessary, the type of automations that are done in a way that takes in account what live compliance does, privacy and security, and ensuring that if you do use outside tools, that you have someone who holds your hand to make sure that your workforce is your first line of defense. You as a company might say, this is a great tool and we're going to use it, and you see the efficiency. And then you find out later it's been used in a way that now you have some reportable, or one of your clients that you work for as a covered entity now has a reportable incident to the Office for Civil Rights. So that's what that focus is in supporting, ensuring the privacy and security of that information, not to thwart or to stop the progress of using these tools. They're amazing. The things that are going to come of this is just amazing. But there also are protections that should be in place for medical and healthcare privacy.
The automations were doing tasks that people do today, or that with automation, typically that the risk of protection, privacy, is actually higher than the human level, or the same, or less.
The most obvious pointer is higher because of how fast things can happen now. You put an automation in place and it could just be doing thousands of things, and you had no idea those 1,000 things just got sent out to the wrong place, or whatever. So, so higher because of speed, higher because of so many things are on these different cloud platforms and new technology, or not so much technologies, but new platforms that use these new technologies. Um, or have they been vetted? It says private and secure, but I mean, did you just read that on a website? Is it really?
I don't know how many years ago was it then that Al Gore invented the internet.
Yeah.
In the beginning of the internet, there's infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
That is there, that everything really uses. And so in AI, there's infrastructure, right? That everything is using, the big companies, Microsoft, Apple, Google, they all have infrastructure now in AI. And then there's applications, and then there's different levels of things. Where are we today with AI relative using the internet as a
Oh gosh. Well, just week over week, AI is different. It's not like the internet where it was years. Now it's
yeah, but are we like 1980 internet today in AI, or
oh yes. Oh, this is
it's early in the whole evolution of AI?
oh yeah. This is like the dot-com days where it was just, if you had a dot-com, you were a high-tech company and no one knew what that was. AI is just getting started, in my view.
Yeah. So we're a data company, right? So what we've done is been very much involved in our creation of systems and platforms to create data, right? To obtain data, to store data, um, and so my approach, right, and my mindset on this is that we have to pass through, we have to evolve, right? This is evolution, not revolution, right?
Mhm.
We have to be smart and strategically take steps, right, to get from a present day reality to a future reality. And the human's in the loop, right? The human, there's a term, human in the loop,
Yeah.
which is you're not just replacing a human, you're enhancing and augmenting what a human can do. And my view of AI, for the most part, is that that's an essential evolutionary step, is that we optimize the human before we replace a human. And so, what's interesting for me is we're sitting on data about not risk, but administrative tasks, time inflators, time demand, complexities, and things that absolutely no one else has. And so, we kind of see the evolution of AI needing to be driven by data, identifying where the best opportunities are in terms of inefficiencies, high levels of complexities, things that are really difficult for a human to do successfully. So maybe last point here for today. What are your thoughts on some things are very straightforward and structured and simple.
Yeah.
Other things are really complex and there's lots of moving parts and lots of um, information and data that has to be considered to make decisions from. And then there's the stuff in the middle. What do you see AI really fitting in the context of replacing straightforward, simple, boring, mundane versus helping really complex decision making types of things happen better, or somewhere in the middle?
Well, I think you nailed it. It's the model. And like you said, you're a data company. So having all of that data allows the beauty of what AI can make simple and easy to understand and do things very, very fast with a lot of data that the human could take a long time to dive into and look for those outliers and stuff like that. So it really is that model. That's one of the benefits of why AI is getting better and better is because they now have, you know, billions and billions of data sets within these models. So you being very data driven, even if you have AI, which can help write an email in 1 second, okay, great. But can it really help uncover inefficiencies and time inflators? And what do you do with that kind of stuff? Well, the AI, if it doesn't have the data, is going to hallucinate and give you an answer, and it could point you in a totally wrong direction. So it really comes down to that data and understanding how to interact with it. And when you're talking about data, again, privacy and security comes into it. Where is that data going?
There's rules and things that you can put in place as you're doing this to prevent your AI from going and like you said, hallucinating, which is essentially making up its own reality based on pieces of information
Based
in
on what it has.
picture,
Yeah.
right?
Giving you the best answer it can come up with, and doing things in a way where you don't poison that data or inject incorrect information in that data. If you're chatting with it and you point it in one direction, it'll go. So having that model with the right data and the right prompts and the right guardrails is a totally different thing than just something wide open that'll tell you whatever you ask it.
Hey, what's going on in healthcare business integrations with automations and chat GPT are not the same thing, right?
Yeah.
It's two different, there's
Yeah.
a lot more to it than ask a large language model a question. Yeah.
Totally.
Well, I appreciate your time today, Jim. This I thought was really interesting. How could people reach out to you if they're interested in connecting?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, livecompliance.com. You can get us there. And as much as we love AI, you'll get a human. So yeah, if you have questions, if you want to, just a high level organization assessment, we're happy to talk through that with you. So
That's probably the first best way to connect to you is
yes,
yeah. And in the revenue cycle world, we do exactly the same thing. Before we could even seriously have conversations about services or data, implementations in our data platform, we have to know what your present reality is. And so we evaluate your accounts receivables, we audit open claims over 30 days old. We really build a data story that says exactly how things are happening today, and so that we have baselines well established, and we know how things have changed over time.
yeah.
And that's exactly what you do. And I know that when we started with you, you did our assessment. You gave me a number, 700 million. Our number was, it was a big number of here's your overall cumulative risk score. And, we did this and that, and we did all these things, and we put all this stuff in place. And today our score is 0.
And that's why we call it live compliance. It's not a one-time exercise, just like you do in your revenue cycle. It's an ongoing thing, and making that easy and doable for organizations that are small or even bigger. Health networks, we support them. So yeah,
What was an eye opener to me when we did our assessment, and we've locked it all down, and we have these controls, and we've put many things in place over the past several years that we've been working with you. And I go to sleep every night not really worrying about PHI problems, and peace of mind is a valuable thing these days. And that's kind of what I think one of the ways to look at the business you're in is to just help practice owners who live in risk, whether they're aware of it or not. It's there. And as in our world, complexities in revenue cycle are there, whether you're aware of them or not. They are real, and they are everywhere. And so just starting the process of becoming more aware, understanding these realities of being in this kind of business, and then having some kind of strategic plan about how to move forward, what to focus on to mitigate risk, to improve outcome, to be more effective, to be more efficient, right? And essentially have a better business. So that's at the bottom line of what this is all about.
yeah.
Well, great. As always, Robert at RevenueCycleSolutionsLLC.com or Robert at AscendSolutionsLLC.com. Jim is contact information, livecompliance.com.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed this, and appreciate your time, Jim.
Thank you so much.